If you've ever felt ignored within your own family, this tale will resonate with you. I'm Logan Pierce, the middle child of the Pierce software legacy, and let me tell you, being overlooked has its advantages. When I entered our Boston mansion for Thanksgiving, no one anticipated that I was about to turn the family dynamics on their head. They assumed I would stick to my usual quiet demeanor. They were mistaken. The announcement Dad was preparing to make during dinner wasn't just going to rattle our family, it was going to pave the way for a reckoning he never expected. If you've ever found yourself caught in the turmoil of a family business, you'll want to stay tuned. Leave a comment, hit subscribe, and see how I turned my father's betrayal into the most satisfying revenge imaginable. I grew up in Brooklyn, Boston's wealthiest suburb, in a 6-bedroom colonial home with an indoor heated pool and a lawn so expansive it required 3 gardeners. To the outside world, we epitomized the American dream. My grandfather, Lucas Pierce, founded Pierce Software Solutions in his garage in 1978 with just a battered computer and a revolutionary idea. He transformed it into a regional powerhouse before passing it on to my father, Harold, in 1995. Dad took that foundation and built it into a $50 million empire with 200 employees and clients across the nation. And he never missed an opportunity during holidays, vacations, or barbecues to remind us of his genius. There were 3 Pierce children. Garrett, 38, the so-called golden boy, effortlessly stepped into a VP position after college, despite spending most of his time on his boat with girlfriends. I was the middle child, the one who genuinely shared my grandfather's enthusiasm for technology. I started coding at 12, launched my first app at 15, graduated summa cum laude from MIT, and had ideas that could have advanced the company. But to Dad, I was invisible. Then there was Maya, 29, the youngest, who transformed the Pierce name into a glamorous influencer brand with hundreds of thousands of followers captivated by her polished old money image. She had no interest in software or business operations, yet she never missed a chance to post about being a Pierce software analyst while contributing nothing to the company's success. Mom Diane hailed from old Boston money and dealt with family conflicts like all proper Beacon Hill wives, by completely ignoring them and pouring another glass of Chardonnay. She acted as a peacekeeper but ultimately enabled Dad's worst behaviors, particularly his disregard for my business skills. Harold, maybe you should consider Morgan's idea, she would occasionally suggest at dinner, only to immediately retreat when Dad shot her that look. Diane, please. We're discussing actual business here, he would say before turning back to Garrett to continue their chat about golf or yacht clubs or whatever non-business topic they were really on. Family gatherings always revolved around business discussions that somehow left me out. Dad and Garrett would monopolize the conversations with industry jargon and inside jokes while I sat quietly, even though I understood the technology and market better than either of them. If I attempted to join in, Dad would smile condescendingly and say something like, "That's sweet, Morgan. But let's leave the business discussions to those who grasp the real world." The tipping point came when I was 22. Fresh out of MIT with honors, I had created a cloud-based integration solution that could have transformed our product line years before competitors entered that market. I spent months crafting a detailed business plan, market analysis, and technical specifications. Dad finally agreed to let me present during a board meeting, supposedly as a professional courtesy. I still remember entering that mahogany-paneled boardroom, laptop and presentation materials in hand, my heart racing with a mix of nervousness and excitement. The board members, all men in their 50s and 60s who had been Dad's friends for decades, observed with polite but distant expressions as I connected my laptop to the projector. 10 minutes into my presentation, Dad glanced at his watch, let out a loud sigh, and raised his hand to interrupt me mid-sentence. "I believe we've seen enough," he remarked with a forced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Morgan, dear, this is all very imaginative, but entirely impractical for a serious business like ours. Our clients seek stability, not experimental technologies." He turned to the board members with an apologetic shrug. My daughter has just graduated from college and is brimming with these academic ideas. Now, shall we proceed to actual business matters? The embarrassment washed over me as I gathered my materials while they laughed and moved on as if I had never existed. That evening, I made a decision that would alter everything. I would leave Boston and the family business behind. I would create something of my own, something so successful that even my father couldn't dismiss it. I relocated to San Francisco with $5,000 in savings and nothing more. My parents thought it was merely a phase, a tantrum. They indulged in patronizing amusement. "She'll return when she runs out of money," I overheard Dad telling Mom on the phone during one of our increasingly rare conversations. Those early years were tough. My tiny studio apartment in a sketchy neighborhood consumed nearly my entire monthly budget. I lived on ramen noodles and coffee, working 80-hour weeks. Initially at entry-level coding jobs, then as a freelance developer. Every dollar I could save went into establishing my own company. I founded Everest Holdings under the pseudonym Stone. The initials represented Morgan Elizabeth, but no one knew that. I wanted my success or failure to be entirely separate from the family name. I started small, developing custom enterprise solutions for startups, reinvesting every profit. By the third year, I had 10 employees and a legitimate office in Soma. The turning point occurred when I created a unique integration platform that enabled legacy systems to interact effortlessly with contemporary cloud services, ironically reminiscent of what I had proposed to my father years ago. Venture capitalists showed interest, but I held on to majority ownership, resolute in steering my own path. Over the subsequent 7 years, I strategically acquired smaller tech firms that enhanced our offerings. Everest Holdings expanded to a valuation of $200 million, with offices in 3 different cities. Throughout this journey, I kept my pseudonym in all business transactions. In the tech industry, Emmy Stone was recognized as a brilliant yet elusive founder who seldom granted interviews or attended industry gatherings. When I absolutely needed to make public appearances, I made subtle adjustments to my look and allowed my COO to handle most of the discussions. My family remained entirely oblivious to my achievements. During holiday phone calls and occasional visits, I kept my conversations ambiguous, describing my work as doing fine or still figuring things out. Dad never probed for specifics, having already dismissed my career as insignificant. This suited me perfectly as I developed Everest into something that would eventually astonish them all. What they were unaware of was that for the past year, I had been strategically acquiring shares in companies that were essential suppliers and clients of Atom Software. I analyzed their quarterly reports, pinpointed their vulnerabilities, and positioned Everest as the ideal buyer to elevate Pierce's software to new heights. 6 months ago, I instructed my CFO to send an anonymous acquisition proposal through a third party, which my father predictably dismissed without due consideration. Now, 10 years after facing humiliation in that boardroom, I was heading home for Thanksgiving with a strategy that would transform everything. Pierce's software was faltering due to outdated technology and losing market share. My father was unaware, but I was on the verge of becoming his worst nightmare and his only hope. The week leading up to Thanksgiving found me in my corner office with a view of San Francisco Bay, wrapping up the paperwork for what would become the most significant deal of my life. My assistant knocked and walked in with my travel itinerary. "Your private jet is booked for Tuesday at 11 a.m., she informed me, placing the folder on my desk. "Are you certain you don't want to take your executive team to Boston for the signing?" I shook my head. "This is personal. I need to manage it on my own." After she left, my phone rang. It was Isabella, my best friend since those early challenging days when we lived in adjacent studio apartments. "Are you really going to go through with this family Thanksgiving charade?" she asked bluntly after 2 years of barely speaking to them. I sighed and turned in my chair to look out the window. "I have to be there in person when it happens, Izzy. I need to see his face." "I remember the last Christmas disaster," she said cautiously. Your father announced Garrett's promotion to executive vice president while you sat there with your unacknowledged Series B funding round. You returned to California and didn't talk to them for months. The memory was painful. Dad had raised a toast to the future of Pierce's software while staring directly at my brother, who had been too hungover to contribute anything of value to the strategy meeting earlier that day. This time will be different, I vowed. Everything changes this Thanksgiving. I spent the evening packing, carefully selecting my outfits to make a statement. Gone were the casual clothes my family associated with me. Instead, I packed Armani suits, a Chanel dress for Thanksgiving dinner, Louboutin heels, and the subtle markers of success that only the affluent recognize, a Patek watch, a Bottega Veneta handbag, and small diamond earrings from Tiffany. None of it was flashy, but all of it was undeniably expensive. After years of intentionally downplaying my success around my family, I wanted them to catch glimpses of it before the final reveal. On Tuesday morning, I stepped onto the private jet that I seldom utilized, as I usually opted for commercial flights despite my affluence. However, this journey called for a different approach. Throughout the 5-hour flight, I meticulously went over the contract again, making sure every detail was flawless. It struck me as ironic that for years I had traveled in coach to Boston, munching on airplane peanuts and squeezing into middle seats, all while constructing the empire that now afforded me the luxury of arriving in style. The jet touched down at a private airfield just outside Boston, where a black Bentley awaited on the tarmac, another rare indulgence I had arranged specifically for this occasion. As we drove through familiar neighborhoods towards Brooklyn, I experienced a curious blend of nostalgia and determination solidifying within me. The Pierce family estate appeared just as it always had, with its grand colonial architecture and impeccably maintained grounds, now lightly dusted with November snow, and a wreath already adorning the door in anticipation of the holiday season. I instructed the driver to hold on, then took a deep breath before ascending the steps I had climbed countless times before. Mom opened the door herself, eager to see me and skipping the housekeeper. Her eyes widened slightly as she took in my appearance. "Morgan, darling," she exclaimed, enveloping me in a hug that carried the scent of expensive perfume and a hint of midday wine on her breath. "You look different." "Is that a Rolex?" "PC Fipe," I replied, returning her embrace. "Good to see you, Mom." She led me inside, chatting about Thanksgiving plans and Maya's latest Instagram achievement. I nodded politely, placing my bag down in the grand foyer, complete with its sweeping staircase and crystal chandelier. Home sweet home, filled with all its complex memories. "Your father is in his study," Mom mentioned. "He's been very busy with some big deal." "Very hush-hush, even with me." I smiled. "I'll say hello before I get settled." Dad's study had always felt like forbidden territory, a masculine haven of leather, mahogany, and business journals. I knocked once and entered without waiting for a reply, a small act of defiance. He looked up from his desk, reading glasses resting on his nose, surprise flickering across his face before settling into his usual mild disinterest. "Morgan, you made it." He stood for a brief, awkward hug, then gestured vaguely toward the chair across from his desk. "The trip from California was good." "Very smooth," I replied deliberately, not taking the offered seat. "I flew private." "Saves time." A momentary confusion crossed his features. "Private, that must have been costly." I shrugged. "Business is good." Before he could ask more, his phone rang and with a perfunctor, "Excuse me, this is important." He turned away to answer it. I seized the chance to glance at the papers on his desk. There it was, the Everest Holdings acquisition proposal with my company logo prominently displayed. My heart raced, but I kept my composure as he wrapped up his call. "Sorry about that," he said hastily, gathering the papers into a folder. "Big things happening at the company. You wouldn't understand." The familiar dismissal rolled off me like water now. "Of course, Dad. I'll let you get back to it." I left his study and headed upstairs to my old bedroom, which Mom had kept as a shrine to my teenage self. Debate trophies, computer science awards, and MIT pennants still adorned the walls, dusty testaments to achievements that had never impressed the one person whose approval I had sought most. After freshening up, I went downstairs and found Garrett in the living room already sipping scotch at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He had our father's tall frame and confident posture, but years of privileged indulgence had softened him around the middle. "Well, well, the prodigal sister returns," he said, raising his glass in a mock toast. "Still playing with computers in California?" "Something like that," I replied with a tight smile. "How is your little startup doing? Making any money yet?" His condescension was so familiar, it almost felt like home. Before I could respond, Maya burst into the room, her phone perfectly angled to capture her entrance for her Instagram followers. "Morgan is here, everyone. It's family reunion time," she declared to her phone before giving me air kisses on my cheeks. "You look fabulous, sis. Did you finally snag yourself a wealthy boyfriend?" "No, just putting in the effort at work," I replied, stepping out of her camera's view. Garrett brought his new girlfriend, Maya, to the forefront, whispering while still recording. "Amber, she's 24 and does yoga professionally." Just then, a tall blonde entered the room, dressed in designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that accentuated her flawless figure. Garrett immediately pulled her close, beaming with pride. "Amber, this is my sister Morgan. She lives in San Francisco and works in tech." His vague gesture brushed aside a decade of my professional achievements. "Oh my God, I adore San Francisco," Amber exclaimed. "The shopping is incredible." Our awkward small talk was cut short by the sound of Dad's raised voice from his study. Although the words were muffled, his enthusiastic tone resonated throughout the house. "Yes, absolutely. Tomorrow after Thanksgiving, $50 million is the final offer." Everest Holdings has been very adamant about the terms. I excused myself to the kitchen, needing a moment of solitude. The household staff had always shown me more kindness than my own family. Maria, our housekeeper for 20 years, was busy preparing vegetables for the feast tomorrow. "Miss Morgan," she greeted me with a warm smile. "It's wonderful to see you. You look great. California suits you." "Thanks, Maria. Do you need any help?" She shook her head. "Your mother wants everything to be perfect for tomorrow. It's a big day," she says. "Your father has some news." I nodded, pondering if the entire household staff was aware of the sale before his own children were. So I gathered. The pre-dinner drinks hour was painfully awkward. Mom flitted around with forced cheerfulness. Dad checked his phone every 3 minutes. Garrett boasted about his new boat to anyone who would listen, while Maya documented every moment for her followers. I savored my wine slowly, taking in the family dynamics with fresh perspective. No longer the wounded daughter in search of approval, but a thriving businesswoman ready to revolutionize everything. "Dinner is ready," Mom finally declared, guiding us toward the formal dining room where our family had celebrated holiday meals for 3 generations. I inhaled deeply and followed them, aware that by the time dessert arrived, everything would change forever. The Pierce family Thanksgiving dinner had always been a grand occasion. The enormous mahogany dining table shone brightly under the glow of the crystal chandelier, adorned with the Wedgwood china that was reserved for special events. Sterling silver candelabras held ivory tapered candles, casting a cozy light over the autumnal centerpiece of pumpkins, gourds, and fall leaves that Mom had surely commissioned from Boston's finest florist. I couldn't help but chuckle at the fact that I was seated at the far end of the table, as far from Dad at the head as possible. Typical. Garrett was positioned at Dad's right side with Amber next to him, while Maya took the spot on Dad's left. Mom occupied her usual place at the opposite end with me, sitting beside her, symbolically distanced from the core of family matters by the expanse of polished wood between us. Maria and the kitchen staff presented dish after dish: butternut squash soup topped with creme fraiche, a harvest salad with candied walnuts and cranberries, and finally, the turkey, a 25-pound bird roasted to golden perfection, served with all the classic sides. Dad carved with ceremonial precision while Maya recorded for her social media, providing a running commentary. And here is Daddy carving the turkey just like his father did before him, upholding the Pierce family tradition of excellence in all they undertake. I noticed Mom winced slightly at Maya's antics before taking a generous sip of her wine. By my estimation, it was her fourth glass since my arrival. Once our plates were filled, Dad lifted his glass for the customary Pierce family gratitude ritual, a moment where we each expressed our thankfulness for the year. It had once held significance before it turned into a competitive showcase. Garrett was the first to speak, as the eldest always was. I am grateful for another record-breaking quarter at Pierce Software, he started, even though I knew from my research that the company had actually lost market share for the third quarter in a row. And for my new 42-foot yacht, the Pierce's legacy. He squeezed Amber's hand and added, and for new beginnings with this wonderful woman. Amber giggled and kissed his cheek, while Maya made exaggerated gagging gestures when Garrett wasn't looking. Next was Maya, her phone still in hand. I am so thankful to have reached 1 million followers this year. My collaboration with Luxury Life Cosmetics has been incredible, and I am grateful to represent our family brand to the world at Pierce. She smiled at Dad, who nodded in approval, despite having often voiced his concerns about her seemingly frivolous career. When it was my turn, I set my fork down and spoke clearly. I am thankful for the lessons life has taught me. That sometimes rejection leads to the right path. That persistence is more important than privilege. And that success is the best teacher. I raised my glass to finding your own way. Dad frowned slightly, perhaps sensing something in my tone, but quickly transitioned to his own gratitude speech, which predictably focused on the business legacy he had created. Mom offered generic thanks for family and health, her words slightly slurred. Throughout the meal, Dad appeared distracted, checking his phone under the table and occasionally whispering to Mom, whose smile became increasingly strained. Garrett monopolized the conversation with tales of clients he had supposedly impressed, while Maya frequently interrupted to share comments from her followers watching her Thanksgiving Instagram story. As Maria entered with the pumpkin and pecan pies, Dad unexpectedly tapped his knife against his crystal water glass, the sharp sound slicing through the dinner chatter. I have an announcement to make, he declared, standing at the head of the table with the authority of someone who is used to commanding attention, one that influences everyone present. The table fell silent. Even Maya put down her phone. As you all know, I have devoted my life to transforming Pierce's software into a leader in our field. However, all good things must evolve, and the moment for change has arrived. He paused for effect. I have made the decision to sell the company. Garrett coughed on his wine. What? Dad, you can't be serious. Dad raised his hand for silence. I have been in discussions for months with a very interested buyer. The deal will be finalized tomorrow. Maya gasped dramatically. But Daddy, what about the Pierce legacy? My brand is built around being a part of Pierce's software. This leads me to the second part of my announcement. Dad continued, his expression unreadable. The proceeds from the sale will not be distributed to you children as inheritance. At this, both Garrett and Maya erupted in protest. That is our birthright. Garrett slammed his fist on the table, causing the china to rattle. What do you mean? Maya cried out, now live streaming the family drama to her followers. Where is the money going? Dad waited for their outbursts to quiet down. Your mother and I will use part of it for our retirement. The remainder will go towards establishing the Pierce Foundation, a charitable organization aimed at supporting technology education. Garrett stood up, his face red with anger. I have dedicated 10 years to this company. You promised it would be mine one day. You promised all of us. Maya joined in, tears streaming down her face, though she carefully angled her phone to capture her most flattering crying angle. Amidst the chaos, I remained perfectly still, taking small, deliberate bites of pecan pie. Mom noticed my calm demeanor and gave me a curious look. "Morgan," she said softly. "You don't appear to be surprised." The table slowly hushed as everyone shifted their attention to me, suddenly recalling my presence. "Actually," I stated, placing my dessert fork down with care. "I have just one question." I gazed directly at my father. "Who is the buyer?" Dad's chest swelled with pride, delighted to possess crucial information that we lacked. "A highly successful tech investment firm named Everest Holdings. They are offering $50 million, which is quite generous considering our recent market difficulties." I took a sip of water, using the pause to prepare myself for what was to come. The atmosphere felt charged with an unusual energy. The moment hung suspended between the past and the future. "Dad," I finally said, my voice steady and clear. "I am Everest Holdings." The room fell utterly silent. I could hear the antique grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, counting the seconds of frozen disbelief. For several heartbeats, no one moved. The silence was complete, as if the very air had solidified around us. I observed the emotions flicker across my father's face in quick succession: confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally the first hints of anger. Garrett was the first to respond, knocking over his wine glass as he stood up abruptly. The red liquid spread across the white tablecloth like blood, a vivid emphasis to the moment. "What the hell are you talking about?" he demanded, glancing between Dad and me with rising panic. Maya, incredibly, was still live streaming, her hands trembling as she recorded what was rapidly turning into the most dramatic content her followers had ever witnessed. "Oh my God," she whispered to her phone. "Did my sister just say she owns Everest Holdings, the company purchasing our family business?" Mom reached for her wine glass, found it empty, and quickly grabbed the bottle instead. I stood up slowly, feeling an odd sense of calm after holding this secret for so long. "Me, Stone," I said. "Morgan Elizabeth Stone. That is the name I have been using professionally for the past decade while building Everest Holdings into a $200 million company." Dad finally found his voice. "This is ridiculous," he sputtered. "Everest Holdings is led by Emmy Stone, a well-respected technology investor, not by my daughter who has merely been dabbling in startups in California." I reached into my purse and pulled out my business card case, which is made of sleek brushed platinum with the Everest Holdings logo engraved on it. I slid a card across the table toward him. "Actually, Dad, I am M. Stone. I founded Everest Holdings 10 years ago after you dismissed my business proposal and embarrassed me in front of your board." Dad grabbed the card, staring at it as if it might change in his hands. "This is some kind of joke," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Everest Holdings now holds controlling interests in Nexus Technologies, Data Stream Solutions, and Techair Industries." I continued to list Pierce Software's 3 largest suppliers. "We also recently acquired majority stakes in your 2 biggest clients, McKinsey Manufacturing and Westfield Distribution. The Atom Software acquisition is the final piece of a strategic plan I have been executing for the past 18 months. You have been spying on our business," Garrett accused, his face contorted with rage. "That is corporate espionage." "No, Garrett. It is called market research. Everything I learned about Pierce's software came from publicly available financial reports, industry analysis, and completely legal channels." I turned back to Dad. "The truth is, Pierce Software has been struggling for years. Your technology is outdated. Your management practices are from the last century, and you have lost 22% market share in the past 3 years." "How dare you," Dad started, but I interrupted him. "I tried to help you first. 6 months ago, Everest Holdings sent an anonymous partnership proposal that would have allowed the Pierce name to stay on the company while providing the capital and technology upgrades you desperately need. You dismissed it without even looking beyond the first page." Dad's eyes widened in recognition. "The Phoenix proposal. That was you. I nodded. I wanted to give you an opportunity to accept help without realizing it was from me. Your pride wouldn't allow it. So all this time, you have been scheming against your own family, Garrett shouted, planning to take over our company. Not take over, Garrett. Legally acquire it for $50 million, which is actually more than its current market value. I maintained a calm tone despite the emotional turmoil inside me. And let's be clear, this company ceased to be our family business the moment Dad made it clear that only one child would ever hold a significant role in it. Despite that child's total lack of qualifications or interest in technology, Maya finally put down her phone, the reality of the situation seemingly dawning on her. So, you are going to be our boss now? She asked in a soft voice. Technically, yes, I confirmed. Although the current management structure will undergo a complete overhaul, Dad stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. This deal is off, he announced. I will not sell my company to my own daughter as some sort of revenge scheme. I shook my head slowly. The contracts are signed, Dad. The board has approved the sale. The press release is set to go out tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Legally, Everest Holdings already owns Pierce's software. I will fight this, he threatened. Yet the uncertainty in his eyes revealed that he already understood I had outsmarted him. My lawyers will. Your lawyers have already thoroughly vetted the deal, I gently interrupted. They advised you it was the best offer you would receive in the current market. What exactly will you tell them now that you are upset because the brilliant CEO you have been negotiating with turns out to be your daughter? Mom finally spoke after my revelation. Her words were slightly slurred, but her gaze was surprisingly clear. All these years, Morgan, all these years you were constructing this while we believed. While you thought I was failing, I completed it for her. Yes, exactly. Dad slammed his hand on the table. You have a decision to make right now, Morgan. You can be my daughter or you can be the one who took my company. You cannot be both. The ultimatum lingered in the air between us, so predictable it almost made me sad. A decade ago, it would have crushed me. Now it simply confirmed what I had always known. That is where you are mistaken, Dad, I said softly. I am both. I always have been. You just refuse to acknowledge it. Maya had begun to cry genuinely now, mascara streaming down her perfectly contoured cheeks. What happens to us, to our trust funds, our positions? That depends, I replied honestly, on whether you want to genuinely work for the company or merely enjoy its benefits. Garrett pointed an accusing finger at me. You orchestrated this for Thanksgiving on purpose, didn't you, to embarrass us in front of the entire family? I arranged it for Thanksgiving because I knew everyone would be present. I corrected him. And because a decade ago at Thanksgiving dinner, Dad announced that he was promoting you to vice president, despite your total lack of qualifications, while telling me my degree from MIT and 3 years of coding experience were insufficient for even an entry-level management role. Dad's face turned red at the reminder. That was different. Garrett is my son, my firstborn. And there it is, I said softly. The real reason I was never given a chance. Not my ideas, not my education, not my work ethic, just my gender. The painful truth silenced the room once more. Even Garrett had the decency to look uncomfortable. This conversation is finished, Dad finally stated. Everyone out. I need to call my attorneys. He stormed out of the dining room, the sound of his study doors slamming echoing through the house moments later. Mom rose unsteadily to her feet. I should go check on him, she murmured, though she paused beside my chair. Are you truly valued at $200 million? I nodded. And all those occasions you couldn't return home for Christmas because you claimed you couldn't afford the airfare. I was managing a company, Mom, and I needed you all to keep underestimating me. She briefly touched my shoulder, her expression unreadable, then followed Dad. As the dining room cleared, I stayed seated, gazing at the deserted Thanksgiving spread around me. The turkey had turned cold, the candles flickered low, and the family I had once yearned to impress had dispersed in shock and anger. It should have felt like a triumph. Instead, a hollow ache filled my chest as I realized that while I had finally captured their attention, I was further than ever from gaining their understanding. I retreated to my childhood bedroom as chaos erupted below. Through the floor, I could hear Dad yelling on the phone, likely to his lawyers, while Mom's soothing tones rose and fell in contrast. Occasionally, Garrett's furious voice would join the noise, followed by Maya's dramatic sobbing. My old room remained frozen in time, a museum to the person I had once been. The twin bed with its navy blue comforter, the desk where I had spent countless hours coding and dreaming, the bookshelves filled with computer science textbooks, and the few fantasy novels I had allowed myself as rare treats. Debate trophies and academic medals gathered dust on the shelves, achievements that had never impressed the one person whose approval I had desired most. I ran my fingers along the spines of my old journals, pulling one out at random. Inside were detailed business plans, algorithm sketches, and notes for the very cloud integration platform that had eventually become Everest's flagship product. The irony was not lost on me that everything I had built had started right here in the room where I had felt most invisible. A sharp knock on the door broke my thoughts. I opened the door to find Garrett standing there, his tie askew and his face either flushed with anger or alcohol, maybe a mix of both. "We need to talk," he declared, pushing past me into the room without waiting for an invitation. I shut the door and leaned against it, arms crossed. "About what, Garrett?" "How I ruined your Thanksgiving, or how you intend to inherit a company you helped drive into the ground." "You think you're so clever?" he hissed, pacing the small room like a trapped animal. Little Morgan with her computers and her secret identity. "Did you enjoy deceiving us all these years?" "Just as much as you relished taking credit for my ideas," I replied calmly. "Remember when I proposed that Pierce's software should transition to cloud-based solutions 6 years ago during Christmas dinner? Dad dismissed it as trendy tech jargon, yet somehow 3 months later, you presented the exact same idea as your own strategic vision." Garrett halted his pacing, his expression darkening. "I was the one who stayed. I was the one who dedicated time to the company while you dashed off to California to prove a point. You did put in time, yes. But what did you actually contribute, Garrett? Aside from expenses on the company credit card for client dinners at strip clubs and a corner office you primarily used for napping between hangovers?" His face twisted with rage. "You have no idea what you're talking about. I secured the Westfield account." Westfield came to Pierce Software because I personally contacted their CTO as Emmy Stone and recommended your services as part of my long-term acquisition strategy. I informed him, and I know exactly what I'm talking about because I've been auditing the company remotely for the past year as part of my due diligence, including the financial records you thought were only accessible on the local server. The color drained from his face. "What are you implying?" "I know about the $300,000 you embezzled through fake vendor accounts, Garrett. I know about the phantom consulting fees that went straight to your personal offshore account. I know everything." He took a menacing step toward me. "You can't prove any of that. I possess transaction records, account numbers, and IP logs that indicate the falsified entries originated from your office computer on days when only you were in the building." I maintained his gaze firmly. "I'm not intending to pursue criminal charges, Garrett. That would negatively impact the company during the transition. But don't push me." He murmured, his hands balling into fists at his sides. "You would betray your own brother. I would hold accountable a thief who just happens to be my relative." I corrected him. "There is a distinction." We stood in tense silence until he finally turned away. "This isn't finished," he warned, yanking the door open. "Actually, it is," I replied to his retreating back. "You just don't realize it yet." I had barely shut the door when another knock sounded. This time it was Maya, her makeup freshly applied despite the tear stains still visible on her cheeks. "So you're like a secret millionaire," she said without preamble, entering my room and immediately sitting on my bed. "That's actually kind of badass." I couldn't help but chuckle at her quick change of tone. "Is that what you were going with 5 minutes ago? You were upset about losing your eyes status." She shrugged, inspecting her manicure. "I'm adaptable. It's crucial for influencer longevity." She looked up with a sudden spark of calculation in her eyes. "Just think of the content we could create together. My sister, the tech mogul. My followers would love that." "Is that why you're here, Maya? To suggest a business partnership?" "More like a mutual arrangement," she said, smoothing her dress. "You need a media presence for your company that makes you relatable, and I need a genuine connection to real business success instead of just looking good with products." The blatantly transactional nature of her proposal was so characteristically Maya that I almost admired it. "And what about actually working for the company, learning the business, contributing something beyond your Instagram aesthetic?" She scrunched her nose in distaste. "Oh no, not this. Coding is dull, and business meetings make me feel like I'm dying inside. But I could take on the role of brand ambassador, representing the company in the lifestyle sector." The representative of an enterprise software integration platform for the lifestyle market, I repeated to myself slowly. "Do you even hear what you're saying?" Maya stood tall, adjusting her posture. "Fine, go ahead and mock me like everyone else in this family, but my social media expertise is genuinely valuable in today's market, whether you acknowledge it or not. I've built my own brand from scratch, just like you did." I had never thought of that parallel before, and for a moment, I was left speechless. There was an odd kind of truth in her words, even though our approaches and values were vastly different. "I'll think about it," I finally replied, "but not tonight." She nodded, seemingly pleased with this small concession. "Just so you know, I've already shared a post about a significant family business shakeup without going into details. My engagement is skyrocketing." After she left, I settled at my old desk, booting up my laptop to review the final details for tomorrow's announcement. A soft knock interrupted me once more. "Come in," I called out, expecting perhaps Maria with some tea, or one of the household staff. Instead, Mom walked in, looking surprisingly serious considering how much wine she had consumed at dinner. She had changed out of her dinner dress into a cozy cashmere sweater and slacks, her armor of a Boston society wife temporarily set aside. "Your father has locked himself in his study with a bottle of scotch and the company bylaws," she said, settling into the window seat where she used to read me stories as a child. "He believes there must be some loophole to prevent the sale." "There isn't," I replied simply. "His lawyers have already confirmed that." She nodded, glancing around the room thoughtfully. "You know, I kept everything just as you left it. I always thought you would return once you got this rebellion out of your system." "It was never a rebellion, Mom. It was a career, a life." $200 million, she thought, shaking her head slightly. "My little girl secretly built a company worth $200 million while we all believed you were struggling." I turned to face her completely. "You could have asked, Mom. Any of you could have shown real interest in what I was doing, but none of you ever truly wanted to know." Tears filled her eyes. "I knew, Morgan. Not the specifics, not the extent of your success, but I knew you were extraordinary. I noticed it when you were young. The way your mind worked differently, how you grasped things that the rest of us couldn't understand." She wiped her cheeks. "I just didn't know how to support you in a family like ours with a man like your father." "You could have defended me," I said, the old pain unexpectedly rising in my throat. "All those times he dismissed me, humiliated me. You just sat there." "I was wrong," she admitted softly. "I convinced myself I was maintaining peace by being a supportive wife. But I failed as a mother when you needed someone to stand up for you." The simple acknowledgement pierced something that had been frozen inside me for a long time. I had come ready for anger, for accusations, even for legal threats. I hadn't prepared for true remorse. What happens now? Mom asked after a long pause. Tomorrow morning, the acquisition will be made public. Pierce Software will become a subsidiary of Everest Holdings. The company name will stay the same for now, but operations will be entirely restructured. I hesitated, then added. Dad and Garrett will be offered advisory roles with no real authority if they want them, mostly for appearances during the transition. And will you move back to Boston? I shook my head. I will stay in San Francisco. We will set up a new management team here. She nodded, seeming to understand everything I wasn't saying, that I had outgrown this house, this family dynamic, this version of myself. Your father may never forgive you for this, she warned gently. I know, I acknowledged, but this isn't about forgiveness, Mom. It's about finally being recognized. After she left, I worked through the night, getting ready for the morning's confrontation while ignoring Isabella's texts asking for updates. As the first light of dawn crept through my curtains, I slipped into one of my Armani suits, styled my hair into a sleek chignon, and applied the understated makeup that Stone was known for during her rare public appearances. The morning would either mark a new beginning for the Pierce family or its ultimate breakdown. Regardless, I was prepared. When I came down at 7 a.m., the kitchen was eerily silent. Maria handed me a cup of coffee without a word, her eyes reflecting a blend of concern and respect. The formal dining room had been cleared of the Thanksgiving chaos from the night before. No trace of the family explosion remained, except for the lingering tension in the air. I checked my phone and saw 3 missed calls from my executive team, anxious for updates on the acquisition announcement set for 9 a.m. There was also a text from Isabella. Did you drop the bomb? Are they still breathing? I had just finished my response when Dad appeared in the kitchen doorway. He looked older than he had the day before, the lines around his eyes more pronounced, and his usually perfect posture slightly hunched. It was clear he hadn't slept. My study now. His tone left no room for debate. I followed him down the hallway to the room that had always been the heart of the Pierce family's power. The wood-paneled walls were adorned with framed accolades, business journal covers featuring Dad's industry awards, and photos with politicians and celebrities. Notably absent was any acknowledgement of my accomplishments, although my MIT graduation photo was on a side table, partially obscured by more prominent family pictures. Dad took his place behind the enormous desk, a position he had used for decades to intimidate business rivals. I opted not to sit in the visitor's chair as expected. Instead, I perched on the edge of the desk, subtly shifting our power dynamic in a way that did not go unnoticed. My lawyers have confirmed what you mentioned last night, he started, getting straight to the point. The sale is legally binding. The board's decision was unanimous. Naturally, I responded. Pierce Software has been losing market share for 3 years. Your technology is outdated. Your management structure is bloated, and your development pipeline is empty. The board recognized a good offer when they saw it. $50 million, he said, shaking his head. The company was valued at $70 million just 2 years ago. The company was overvalued 2 years ago, I corrected him, and I offered more than any other potential buyer would have. Most would have stripped the assets and completely dissolved the Pierce name. He looked up sharply. Is that your plan, to erase your own family legacy? Despite everything, I respect what my grandfather built and what you expanded. The Pierce name will remain, although the company structure will change significantly for the first time. Uncertainty crossed his features. What exactly are your plans? I had waited 10 years for him to ask my opinion on business matters. The irony was not lost on me. Pierce Software will become the enterprise division of Everest Holdings, focusing on updating your legacy products and integrating them with our cloud platforms. We will retain approximately 60% of the current staff, with significant changes to upper management. And me, he asked, the question clearly weighing on him. You will be offered a position as Chairman Emeritus. No operational authority, but you will maintain an office and can advise on client relationships during the transition. His jaw tightened, a figurehead role, a respected advisory position. I countered with full benefits and a generous compensation package. He stood abruptly, walking to the window that overlooked the immaculately maintained garden. For a long moment, he said nothing, his back to me as he stared out at the property that generations of Pierce success had built. How did you do it? He finally asked, his voice quieter. Now, create something truly valuable even when you started with nothing, no connections, and no startup funds. I had my education, I reminded him, the one thing that couldn't be taken away from me, and I was incredibly motivated to prove you wrong. He turned to face me. I expected you to fail. I know everyone does, fail. I mean, 90% of startups never survive beyond the first 3 years, I thought. He hesitated, appearing to struggle with his words. I thought I was shielding you from unavoidable disappointment. By making sure I never had the opportunity to try, I raised an eyebrow. That's not protection, Dad. That's control. He flinched slightly at the accusation. Perhaps I built this company from the foundation my father laid, expanding it tenfold. I thought I knew what was best. But you didn't, I said simply. You were mistaken about me. Mistaken about the industry's direction. Mistaken about Garrett being the natural successor. At the mention of my brother, Dad's expression darkened. Garrett may have his flaws, but he has been loyal to this company. Garrett has been embezzling from the company for at least 3 years, I informed him bluntly. I have all the documentation. That's part of why I acted now before he could inflict more damage. Dad sank back into his chair, the shock of this new revelation seemingly too overwhelming to handle while standing. That can't be true. $300,000 siphoned through fake vendor accounts. The evidence is undeniable. Why would he need to steal? He earns a generous salary. He has a trust fund. Gambling debts, I said. Sports betting mostly, from what I can tell. Dad buried his face in his hands briefly before looking back up, suddenly showing every bit of his 68 years. So both my son and my company were failing, and I was too blind to notice either. The raw vulnerability in his admission took me by surprise. I had anticipated more anger, more accusations, not this broken acceptance. Not blind, I said, softening my tone slightly, just looking in the wrong direction. A lengthy silence lingered between us, filled with years of miscommunication and lost chances. When he finally spoke again, his tone had shifted, the arrogance was gone, replaced by a hint of genuine curiosity. How did you manage it? He inquired. Really? No connections, no investors familiar with the Adams name. How did you create something so successful? I thought about deflecting, but there was an authenticity in his question that I hadn't seen before in our relationship. I began with small steps. I explained how I did freelance development work to gather funds. Then I developed a proprietary integration platform that addressed a common issue faced by every enterprise in linking legacy systems with modern cloud architecture. It was actually based on the proposal you turned down when I was 22. A flicker of recognition appeared on his face. The one with the middleware solution. I nodded, surprised that he remembered even that much. Yes, I improved it, made it more flexible, used it to draw in our first major clients, reinvested every profit, lived in a studio apartment eating ramen for 3 years to keep costs down, and built a team of brilliant individuals who believed in the vision. Without the Pierce's name to open doors, he reflected. Because of that, in some respects, I corrected him. Being underestimated can be a powerful advantage if you know how to leverage it. No one anticipated my rise. He almost smiled at that. Clearly not. Another silence enveloped us, but it felt different this time, less antagonistic. I glanced at my watch. The press release is set to go out in 45 minutes. We should talk about the next steps. What about Garrett and Maya? He asked. Garrett will be given a choice: resign quietly with a fair severance or face possible legal repercussions for the embezzlement. As for Maya, I paused, considering that she actually made a strong case last night for taking on the role of a brand ambassador. Her social media skills are genuinely valuable in the right context. Dad looked truly surprised. You would keep them involved after everything? This was never about tearing the family apart, Dad. It was about asserting my position on my own terms. He nodded slowly, his eyes falling to the documents on his desk before lifting to meet mine with an unexpected intensity. You completely outmaneuvered me, he remarked, and I was taken aback to sense a hint of what felt like pride in his tone. Your grandfather would have been impressed, coming from him. It was the closest thing to approval I had ever received. A complex feeling surged in my chest. Not entirely vindication, not fully forgiveness, but something lingering in the space between. I learned from observing you, I admitted, even when you believed I wasn't paying attention. He reached out his hand across the desk. So, Chairman Emeritus. I grasped his hand, solidifying the first professional agreement we had ever made as equals. Welcome to Everest Holdings, Dad. 6 months after that pivotal Thanksgiving, I found myself in the newly updated headquarters of Pierce's Everest Technologies. The old Pierce software building had been revamped with open workspaces, cutting-edge technology, and a collaborative atmosphere that honored the company's past while looking towards its future. My position as CEO of Everest Holdings required me to divide my time between San Francisco and Boston, managing the integration of the two companies and the development of our expanded product line. The transition had its challenges, but it turned out to be more successful than I had even dared to hope. Dad astonished everyone by taking on his chairman emeritus role with surprising grace. Once the initial shock and anger faded, he discovered fulfillment in mentoring younger team members and nurturing relationships with longtime clients. We set up a weekly meeting where he could share insights on company history and industry connections. I found myself genuinely looking forward to these sessions. For the first time, we were cultivating a relationship grounded in mutual respect rather than expectations and disappointments. Garrett's situation had been more intricate. After confronting the evidence of his embezzlement, he had initially threatened to take legal action against both me and the company. Eventually, cooler heads prevailed when he recognized that his options were limited. He accepted a conditional offer to repay the stolen funds, resign from his executive position, and enroll in an MBA program if he wanted any future role in the business. To my surprise, he opted for education over exile and was now halfway through his first semester, occasionally calling with genuine questions about business strategy. Maya had thrived in her new role as brand ambassador for our consumer products division, a small but expanding part of the business that benefited from her social media expertise. Her followers had been captivated by the dramatic family business saga, which she skillfully presented as a story of female empowerment and family reconciliation rather than the more complex reality. Her Tech Aries rebrand had actually opened doors to younger markets we had previously struggled to reach. Mom had perhaps undergone the most change. Freed from her role as the peacekeeper in a dysfunctional family business, she had reduced her drinking, started volunteering with women's education initiatives, and even joined the board of a tech incubator for female founders. I want to help other girls like you, she told me, so their mothers do not make the same mistakes I did. As I walked through the office, employees nodded respectfully or smiled in greeting. I was no longer Emmy Stone, the mysterious founder, nor Logan Pierce, the forgotten middle child. I was simply Morgan, the CEO, who had modernized a failing family business and created new opportunities for everyone involved. My assistant interrupted my thoughts. Your father is waiting in the conference room with the quarterly reports, she informed me, and your mother called to confirm dinner tonight with the potential investors. I expressed my gratitude to her and made my way to the meeting, taking a moment to stop by the newly unveiled company timeline in the main lobby. It showcased the journey of Pierce's software, starting from my grandfather's garage startup to our present form as Pierce's Everest Technologies. My picture now shared the wall with those of my grandfather and father. 3 generations of leadership, with my accomplishments displayed with equal significance as theirs. Thanksgiving was just around the corner, and this year would be a whole new experience. We had organized a smaller, more personal family dinner, steering clear of the performative traditions that had characterized our past gatherings. No formal expressions of gratitude, no business posturing, just family. We were still learning how to genuinely see and hear one another. The path from rejection to leadership had been longer and more challenging than I ever anticipated when I departed from Boston a decade ago. The daily challenges of blending family and business demanded patience and perspective that I was still cultivating. There were times when the burden of past grievances threatened to overshadow the progress we had achieved, especially when old communication patterns resurfaced during tense meetings or family dinners. The toughest aspect had not been the acquisition itself, but the continuous effort to forge relationships that could endure both our shared history and our current professional roles. Dad still occasionally reverted to his authoritative style before realizing it. I sometimes found myself being unnecessarily defensive, bracing for dismissals that no longer occurred. Yet, gradually, conversation by conversation, the Pierce family was fostering a new dynamic. Mom had organized a dinner last month where, for the first time in my recollection, everyone spoke equally, everyone listened, and no one left in anger. Small victories, but they were significant. Perhaps the most impactful moment came unexpectedly during a late night at the office when Dad and I were going over the first quarter results following the merger. The figures surpassed all expectations, with client retention at an impressive 98% and new contracts boosting revenue by 32%. You know, he remarked, gazing at the spreadsheet, you have already achieved more than I did in my first 10 years managing this company. That simple acknowledgement mended something within me that I hadn't realized was still fractured. Not because I required his professional validation anymore, but because it symbolized the human recognition I had been seeking all along. This experience taught me that mere success is insufficient to mend family wounds. The joy of proving myself was delightful but ultimately empty until it fostered a true connection. I had to understand that there is a distinction between winning and resolving, between being correct and being whole. As I walked into the conference room where Dad awaited with the quarterly reports, I contemplated how intricate the journey had been from that Thanksgiving insight to now. The lesson I took with me was not that success is the ultimate revenge, but that success without reconciliation leaves both parties poorer. Genuine victory came not when I disproved my father, but when we both discovered a way to be right together. For anyone observing this who recognizes the painful dynamics of family business, who has felt overlooked or undervalued by those who should see you most clearly, I hope my story provides both inspiration and caution. Creating your own success is empowering, but healing family wounds requires more than just professional accomplishments. It necessitates honesty, vulnerability, and the bravery to offer second chances even when they appear undeserved. Have you faced similar challenges in a family business? Please comment below and share your experience. How did you navigate the intricate intersection of family and business? Like, subscribe, and share if this resonated with you. Thank you for being a part of my journey from rejection to reconciliation. And remember, the true measure of success is not what you build alone, but what you create together.